Welcome to our channel. Before we dive into today's true crime story, we'd like to share a brief disclaimer. This video is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The content may include graphic details and sensitive topics that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. The information presented is based on publicly available sources and is not meant to harm or defame anyone involved. Now, if you enjoy gripping stories like this and want to join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Your support helps us continue bringing you these fascinating stories. All right, let's get into today's case. Rodney Alcala had tasted freedom again, but with every moment, every passing day, he was becoming a more dangerous predator. The calm before the storm, only this time, there would be no escape for him. Julie J. was only 13 years old when she accepted what she thought was a simple ride to school. Instead, she became another victim in Alcala's disturbing pattern of behavior. This incident not only highlights the dangers lurking in seemingly innocent situations, but also raises questions about the effectiveness of the justice system in protecting vulnerable individuals. After his rearrest, the legal system faced scrutiny. How could someone with such a dangerous history be allowed back into society? Alcala's case serves as a stark reminder of the complexities surrounding parole and the need for stricter measures to ensure community safety. By 1977, Rodney Alcala had already proven that he was a master manipulator, slipping through the cracks of the justice system time and time again. But this time, his parole officer made a shocking decision, one that would unknowingly allow him to continue his reign of terror. In a move that would later be questioned, Alcala's parole officer permitted the convicted sex offender, who was already known as a flight risk, to travel from Los Angeles to New York City, a decision that, as we would come to learn, would cost someone their life. Ellen Jane Hover was no ordinary young woman. She was the daughter of nightclub owner Herman Hover, the goddaughter of legendary performers Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. She had a promising career ahead of her, a life full of potential. But on July 15, 1977, that life was violently and abruptly taken from her. Ellen had an appointment on that fateful day to meet a man named John Berger. But John Berger was just an alias, an identity crafted by Rodney Alcala, a name used to deceive and lure victims into his web. It was the last meeting she would ever have. Weeks passed after Ellen's disappearance, and her family and friends were frantic. Investigators began to piece together the timeline and discovered that Alcala, who had used the alias John Berger, had been the last person to meet with Ellen before she vanished. In 1977, the FBI received a tip about Alcala's previous arrest in New Hampshire. They knew Alcala was a suspect in the Shapiro case from California, and when they questioned him, he admitted knowing Ellen Jane Hover. But without a body, they couldn't make an arrest. In 1978, nearly a year after Ellen's disappearance, her body was finally discovered, buried beneath heavy rocks on a hillside overlooking the Hudson River. The location was eerily familiar to those who had come into contact with Alcala. It was a place where he had taken aspiring models to pose for photographs, an innocent-sounding activity that in Alcala's hands became another terrifying trap. For years, investigators were left with more questions than answers. But in the end, it was clear. Alcala had not only manipulated those around him with charm and deceit, but he had also left a trail of terror and tragedy in his wake. Alcala had once again slipped through the cracks, leaving his victims behind in his wake. But now, with evidence mounting, the question remained: how many more women had met the same fate as Ellen Jane Hover? In 1977, Rodney Alcala moved to Los Angeles, hoping for a fresh start. He landed a job as a typesetter at the prestigious Los Angeles Times, but beneath his calm exterior lay a dangerous predator. Just months after starting his job, he was interviewed by the Hillside Strangler Task Force due to his past as a sex offender. Although he was cleared as a suspect, Alcala's dark side was just beginning to emerge. In 1978, as Rodney Alcala was quietly continuing his killing spree, he was about to gain nationwide attention, though for all the wrong reasons. It's hard to imagine that, at the very same time he was committing unspeakable crimes, Alcala was sharing the screen with millions of people, smiling and posing as the perfect bachelor. It was, as it turns out, one of his most chilling performances yet. Alcala, then in his late 30s, appeared as one of the bachelors on this popular dating game show. A show that, to the unknowing public, was simply about innocent fun and lighthearted romance. Jim Lang introduced him as a successful photographer, someone who, when not working, could be found skydiving or motorcycling. But beneath that charming exterior, the real Rodney Alcala was a predator. And the woman in the spotlight, Cheryl Bradshaw, would soon realize that. Alcala, with his practiced charm, won over Cheryl Bradshaw, the bachelorette, despite his strange and unnerving demeanor. His answers were unsettling, outlandish even, yet he managed to convince her enough to win a date. But things would take a dramatic turn when the cameras stopped rolling. When the moment of truth arrived and Cheryl was asked to choose her bachelor, she picked Alcala. But in the days following the taping, Cheryl would make a decision that sent shockwaves through the show and perhaps saved her life. Despite Alcala's victory on screen, Cheryl refused to go on the date with him. Why? Because, as she later revealed, she found him creepy. He was just odd. Something about him just didn't sit right with me. He was very strange, and his answers to some of the questions were just bizarre. I knew there was something off, and I'm glad I trusted my instincts. Cheryl's refusal to go on the date might seem like a simple rejection, but in reality, it was a crucial moment. One of the many instances where Alcala's charm failed him. However, it wouldn't be the last time he attempted to use his disarming smile to lure in an unsuspecting victim. While Cheryl Bradshaw had a fortunate escape from Alcala's grasp, the true horror of his life was far from over. His behavior on the dating game was just one part of a much darker and more chilling reality, one that would continue to unfold with the terror of his actions only intensifying. July 1979. After years of evading justice, the man once known as the dating game killer was finally arrested. But this wouldn't be the end of his nightmare for both the victims' families and the people of California. It was only the beginning of a prolonged battle within the legal system, where every twist, every turn, and every attempt at manipulation would keep justice just out of reach, until it could no longer be denied. When Alcala was arrested in 1979, it was not only for the murder of 12-year-old Robin Samso, but for his entire life of deception. With his arrest, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, linking him to multiple unsolved murders. But there was one problem. The legal system had failed to bring him to justice before, and it would fail again, temporarily. In May 1980, after a grueling trial, Alcala was convicted of Samso's murder and sentenced to death. The victory felt sweet until the California Supreme Court intervened in 1984, ruling that his prior sex crimes had been improperly admitted as evidence. In a shocking turn of events, Alcala's conviction was overturned. In 1986, after a second trial, Alcala was convicted again. This time, the prosecution had learned from their mistakes, but that didn't stop him. His defense team would continue to stall, delaying the inevitable. In 1992, the California Supreme Court upheld the conviction, but Alcala wasn't done. He filed a petition for a federal habeas corpus hearing, and in 2001, a federal judge overturned his conviction yet again. The legal battles dragged on, but the truth was creeping ever closer. In 2003, investigators made a breakthrough. DNA evidence that had been taken from Alcala under a new state law finally tied him to the murders of multiple women, cold cases that had remained unsolved for decades. DNA matched Alcala's semen to the murder scenes of 2 women in Los Angeles, women he had brutally assaulted and murdered. But that was only the start. By 2004, Alcala was facing charges for the deaths of 4 more women, including Jill Barcombe, Georgia Wickstead, Charlotte Lamb, and Jill Parenteau. Each victim's body was found posed, meticulously arranged by the man who had taken their lives, his signature brutality evident in every detail. Alcala's third trial would be nothing short of bizarre. In 2006, the California Supreme Court ruled that the cases could be tried together. And this time, Alcala took it even further, choosing to represent himself in court. He made his own defense, asking questions of himself in a disturbing, self-assured tone, as though playing both sides of the trial. For 5 hours, he spoke in a strange monotone, addressing himself as Mr. Alcala in a deeper-than-normal voice. The audacity of it was mind-boggling, but it was the defense of a man who had grown used to manipulating those around him. But the prosecution was prepared, and despite Alcala's bizarre antics, the evidence was undeniable. DNA links, witness testimony, and a damning pattern of behavior led the jury to a swift conviction. After just 2 days of deliberation, Alcala was found guilty on all 5 counts of first-degree murder. The sentencing phase was equally shocking. A surprise witness emerged, Tali Shapiro, the young girl he had nearly murdered decades earlier. She spoke of her terrifying ordeal and the lasting scars it left on her. It was a powerful moment that solidified the prosecutor's argument that Alcala was not just a murderer, but a predatory monster. In March 2010, Rodney Alcala was sentenced to death once again. His fate seemed sealed, but as his trial wrapped up, the surprise came from New York. In January 2011, authorities in New York decided to take action. Despite his conviction in California, they would not let him go free. He was indicted for the murders of Cornelia Crilly and Ellen Hover, women he had killed years earlier. In a final twist, Alcala would be tried in New York in 2012. But instead of fighting the charges, he pled guilty, seeking to end the matter and return to California to pursue more appeals. In December 2012, he changed his pleas to guilty. His desire to return to California, where he would continue his appeals, was greater than his need to fight in New York. And on January 7, 2013, he was sentenced to 25 years to life, additional years to serve on top of his death sentence in California. Rodney Alcala may have evaded the full weight of the law for decades, but in the end, his monstrous acts caught up with him. For those who survived his grasp, for the families of the victims, and for the many others whose lives were forever altered by this predator, justice has been served, but the echoes of Alcala's crimes will never fade. Hey there, if you're enjoying these gripping stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, why not stick around for more? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a twist. We're just getting started, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's next.